My name is Harper, and I'm 28 years old. I have a story about the day I discovered my parents gave my entire inheritance to my unemployed brother while I was working 3 jobs to support myself through medical school. What they didn't know was that karma had other plans, and I was about to become their only hope for survival. You won't believe what happened when they came crawling back to me. Comment below and tell me where you're watching from, and let me know what you would have done in my situation. I need to tell you about the day my world came crashing down, but also the day I discovered just how strong I really was. Growing up, my family had this unspoken rule that I never quite understood until it was too late. My brother Jake, who's 2 years older than me, was the golden child. I was the workhorse. While Jake spent his teenage years playing video games and barely graduating high school, I was studying until 2 a.m., working part-time jobs, and basically raising myself. My parents, Linda and Robert, owned a successful accounting firm in our small town in Ohio. They weren't millionaires, but they were comfortable. Very comfortable. The kind of comfortable where they could afford to send both their kids to college without taking out loans, if they wanted to. But here's the thing. They only wanted to for one of us. When Jake graduated high school with a 2.3 GPA, my parents threw him a massive graduation party and handed him a check for $25,000 as a college fund. When I graduated valedictorian 2 years later, I got a card that said, "We're proud of you," and a lecture about how I needed to learn to be independent. I remember standing in our kitchen that summer, acceptance letter to pre-med in my hand, asking my dad about college funding. He looked at me over his reading glasses and said, "Harper, you're smart enough to figure it out. Jake needs more help than you do." That sentence changed everything for me. Not just because of what it meant for my future, but because of what it revealed about how my family saw me. I wasn't their daughter who deserved investment. I was their daughter who was expected to invest in everyone else. So I did what I always did. I figured it out. I worked 3 jobs through college, waitressing at night, tutoring during the day, and cleaning offices on weekends. I graduated summa cum laude with a biology degree and got into medical school on a partial scholarship. I was exhausted, but I was proud. I was building something with my own hands. Meanwhile, Jake flunked out of community college after 1 semester, moved back home, and spent the next 6 years bouncing between video game addiction and half-hearted attempts at various business ventures that my parents funded. Every time he failed, they bailed him out. Every time I succeeded, they reminded me how lucky I was to be naturally gifted. But I still believed that family was family. I still thought that when it really mattered, when the big moments came, they would see me as more than just the reliable one who didn't need help. I was about to learn just how wrong I was. The call came on a Tuesday in March, during my 2nd year of medical school. I was in the library, buried in anatomy textbooks, when my phone buzzed. It was my mom. "Harper, honey, we need to talk to you about something important. Can you come home this weekend?" There was something in her voice, a nervous energy that I'd never heard before. Something that made my stomach clench with anticipation. I should have known then that my world was about to change forever. That weekend, I drove the 4 hours from medical school back to my hometown, my mind racing with possibilities. Maybe they finally wanted to help with my crushing student loan debt. Maybe they were proud of my grades and wanted to celebrate. Maybe, for once, I was going to be the child they invested in. I walked into our family living room to find my parents sitting stiffly on the couch, and Jake lounging in the recliner with a smug expression I'd seen too many times before. "Sit down, Harper," my dad said, gesturing to the chair across from them. The formal tone made my palms sweat. This felt like a business meeting, not a family conversation. "We wanted to talk to you about our estate planning," my mother began. not quite meeting my eyes. We've been working with our lawyer, and we've made some decisions about the future. My heart started racing. Estate planning meant inheritance. It meant they were finally thinking about both of their children equally. We know you're doing well in medical school, my dad continued. You've always been so independent, so capable of taking care of yourself. We're really proud of that. Here it comes, I thought. The but Jake has been struggling, my mom jumped in. He's had a hard time finding his path, and we think he's going to need more support as he gets older. I looked over at Jake, who was now grinning openly. My stomach started to sink. So we've decided, my dad said, clearing his throat, to leave the majority of our assets to Jake. The house, the business, the savings accounts. We know he'll need the stability. The words hit me like a physical blow. I actually felt my chest tighten, like someone had wrapped a band around my ribs and pulled. What do you mean, the majority? I managed to ask. Well, there's about $15,000 in your old college fund that we never touched, my mom said quickly. That will go to you, of course. $15,000. Out of an estate worth nearly $2 million. I looked around the room at these people who shared my DNA, who had raised me, who I had worked so hard to make proud. Jake was barely containing his excitement. My parents looked uncomfortable but resolute. I don't understand, I said quietly. I've worked for everything my entire life. I put myself through college. I'm in medical school. I've never asked you for anything significant. And Jake hasn't worked a real job in 6 years. That's exactly the point, my dad said. You don't need help. You've proven that over and over. Jake needs us to take care of him. But what about fairness? I asked, my voice starting to shake. What about treating your children equally? My mother sighed like I was being difficult. Harper, equal doesn't always mean fair. Jake has different needs than you do. Different needs? I stood up, my hands trembling. He needs to learn to take care of himself. He's 30 years old. Don't raise your voice at us, my dad warned. We've made our decision. This is what's best for the family. Jake finally spoke up, his voice dripping with fake sympathy. Hey sis, don't take it so hard. You'll be a doctor someday. You'll make plenty of money. That's when it hit me. This wasn't about need. This wasn't about fairness or love or taking care of family. This was about enabling Jake's laziness and punishing me for my independence. They were giving everything to Jake because they knew I'd survive without it. They were betting on my strength to justify their favoritism. I looked at my parents, really looked at them, and saw strangers. When did you make this decision? I asked. We've been talking about it for a while, my mom said. We finalized the paperwork last month. While I was killing myself studying for midterms, working 20 hours a week at the campus clinic, and living on ramen noodles, they were signing away my future to my brother who hadn't earned $1 in 2 years. I walked to the front door in silence. Behind me, I could hear my mother calling my name, but it sounded like it was coming from underwater. Harper, don't be dramatic, my dad called out. You'll understand when you're older. I turned around one last time. I understand perfectly, I said. I understand that you've been using me my entire life. I understand that in your eyes, being responsible and hardworking makes me worth less, not more. And I understand that you just taught me everything I need to know about where I stand in this family. I left that house knowing I would never be the same person who walked into it. But I had no idea that karma was already working behind the scenes, and my family's perfect plan was about to fall apart in ways they never saw coming. For 3 months after that devastating conversation, I threw myself into my studies like my life depended on it. Maybe because it did. Medical school became my refuge, my proof that I could build a life without them. I didn't call home. I didn't visit. When my mom texted asking if I was still upset about our talk, I didn't respond. I was done being the family's emotional caretaker while they financially abandoned me. But in June, I got a call that changed everything. Harper, this is Mrs. Rodriguez from your parents' accounting firm. I knew Mrs. Rodriguez. She'd been my parents' business partner and closest friend for 15 years. Her voice sounded strained, almost panicked. I need to talk to you about something urgent. Can you meet me for coffee? I can drive to you. Something about her tone made my blood run cold. Is everything okay? Are my parents hurt? They're fine physically. But Harper, there are things you need to know. Things about the business, about your family's finances. Things I probably should have told you months ago. We met at a small cafe near my campus the next day. Mrs. Rodriguez looked like she hadn't slept in weeks. She ordered coffee with shaking hands and wouldn't meet my eyes. I need you to promise me that what I'm about to tell you stays between us until you decide what to do with the information, she said. I nodded, my heart hammering in my chest. Your parents are in serious financial trouble, Harper. The kind of trouble that could destroy everything. The words didn't compute. What do you mean? The business is successful. They own the house outright. They have savings. Mrs. Rodriguez shook her head. Had savings. The business has been hemorrhaging money for 2 years. Your father made some terrible investment decisions, trying to get rich quick. Your mother has been borrowing against the business to cover Jake's expenses, and I mean significant expenses. She pulled out a folder and slid it across the table. Jake's business ventures that kept failing? Each one cost your parents between $10,000 and $50,000. The sports car he drives? $45,000, financed by your parents. The apartment they pay for? $2,000 a month. The credit cards they gave him for emergencies? Maxed out at nearly $30,000. My hands were shaking as I flipped through the documents. Bank statements, loan applications, credit reports. It was all there in black and white. How much? I whispered. They're about $800,000 in debt. The business is 3 months behind on rent. The house has a second mortgage that they can't make payments on. Harper, they're going to lose everything within 6 months. I stared at the papers, my mind reeling. But the inheritance, they said the estate was worth $2 million. On paper, maybe. But when you subtract the debts, there's nothing left. Less than nothing. Mrs. Rodriguez leaned forward. Harper, that inheritance they promised Jake? It doesn't exist. They gave him everything they had while they still had it, and now there's nothing left for anyone. The irony was so sharp it actually made me laugh. A bitter, painful laugh that made Mrs. Rodriguez flinch. So Jake gets everything while they're alive, and I get nothing when they're dead, but actually there's nothing for anyone because they spent it all on Jake anyway. There's more, she said quietly. They're planning to ask you for help. Your mother has been talking about how you'll be a doctor soon, how you'll be able to help the family get back on their feet. The coffee in my stomach turned to acid. They want me to bail them out. I think they're counting on it. I think they always planned for you to be their backup plan. I sat there in that cafe, surrounded by the chatter of other students, and felt something cold and hard crystallize in my chest. This wasn't just about inheritance anymore. This was about a lifetime of manipulation, of being valued only for what I could provide while watching them give everything to someone who provided nothing. They had spent my inheritance on Jake before I even knew I was supposed to get one. They had bet my entire future on the assumption that I would be successful enough to save them from their own bad decisions. Mrs. Rodriguez, I said slowly, how long do you think they can keep hiding this from Jake? She looked confused. What do you mean? Jake thinks he's inheriting $2 million. He has no idea it's all gone, does he? Understanding dawned in her eyes. No, he has no idea. I gathered up the papers and put them in my bag. For the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe clearly. Thank you for telling me this, I said. I need some time to think about what to do. As I drove back to my apartment, I realized that my parents had made a critical error. They had taught me to be independent, resourceful, and strong. They had taught me that I couldn't rely on anyone but myself. What they hadn't considered was that those same qualities meant I didn't need them either. And I was about to show them exactly what that looked like. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of research, planning, and what I can only describe as strategic preparation. For the first time since that awful conversation in March, I felt like I had some control over my situation. First, I verified everything Mrs. Rodriguez had told me. I had grown up around the family business, so I knew enough about their financial systems to do some digging. What I found was even worse than she had described. Jake wasn't just costing them money, he was actively draining every resource they had. The sports car payments, the apartment, the failed businesses, but also smaller things that added up to enormous sums. Expensive dinners charged to their credit cards. Clothes, electronics, even a motorcycle that he'd bought and sold within 3 months. I found records of my mother taking out personal loans to cover his expenses. I found emails between my parents discussing which bills they could afford to skip to keep funding Jake's lifestyle. I found a heartbreaking text thread where my father talked about refinancing the house again to give Jake money for his latest, guaranteed success business idea, selling supplements online. But the most shocking discovery was a conversation I found on my mother's computer between her and my father about me. We need to start laying the groundwork with Harper, the message read. She's going to need to understand that family means helping each other. Maybe we can frame it as an investment opportunity when she starts making doctor money. She's always been responsible, my father had replied. She'll do the right thing when the time comes. She won't let us lose the house. They weren't just counting on me to bail them out. They were strategically planning to manipulate me into doing it. That's when I realized this wasn't just about money. This was about power, control, and a lifetime of conditioning me to believe that my value to the family was in what I could provide, not who I was. But I had something they didn't expect: information. I made copies of everything. Bank statements, loan documents, credit card bills, the inheritance paperwork, emails, text messages. I organized it all into a comprehensive file that told the complete story of my family's financial situation. Then I did something that surprised even me. I called Jake. "Hey, little sis," he answered, sounding genuinely happy to hear from me. "How's medical school?" "Still hitting the books." "It's going well," I said carefully. "Actually, I wanted to talk to you about something. About the inheritance." I could practically hear him perking up through the phone. "Oh, yeah? What about it?" "I've been thinking about what Mom and Dad said, about how you're getting the majority of the estate. I wanted you to know that I understand why they made that decision." "Really?" He sounded surprised. "Because you seemed pretty upset when they told us." "I was emotional," I said. "But I've had time to think about it. You're right that I'll have my medical career. And honestly, Jake, I'm proud of you for all the business ventures you've been trying. That takes real courage." There was a pause. "Thanks, Harper. That actually means a lot coming from you. How much do you think the estate is worth?" I asked casually. "Well, Mom and Dad said around $2 million, but I figure it's probably more than that. The business has been doing great, and property values have gone up. I'm thinking maybe 2.5, 3 million total." My heart pounded. He had no idea. "That's amazing, Jake. You'll be able to really invest in a business that's perfect for you." "Exactly. Actually, I've been looking at this franchise opportunity. It requires about a $200,000 investment up front, but the returns are incredible. I'm thinking I might ask Mom and Dad for an advance on the inheritance to get started. I had to bite my tongue to keep from laughing. An advance on money that didn't exist, to pay for another business venture that would inevitably fail. That sounds like a smart plan, I managed to say. Have you talked to them about it? Not yet, but I'm sure they'll go for it. They've always supported my entrepreneurial spirit. After I hung up, I sat in my apartment and realized that Jake wasn't just the golden child. He was a victim of my parents' enabling too. They had created a 30-year-old man who had no idea how to support himself and no realistic understanding of money, work, or consequences. But unlike me, Jake had never been forced to develop resilience, problem-solving skills, or independence. When this house of cards collapsed, I would survive. I wasn't sure he would. That thought should have made me feel sorry for him. Instead, it made me feel something I'd never experienced before: power. I spent the next week preparing for what I knew was coming. I opened a new bank account and transferred my savings to it. I made sure my student loans and living expenses were set up to be completely independent of any family money. I even started looking into programs that could help me graduate faster and start earning sooner. I was building a fortress around my life, making sure that when my family's world imploded, I would be completely insulated from the damage. Because I knew something they didn't know I knew. The call came on a Thursday evening in July. My mother's voice was tight with barely controlled panic. "Harper, sweetheart, we need to talk to you about something important. Can you come home this weekend? It's about the family, about our future together." I looked at my calendar, at my study schedule, at the life I was building brick by brick with my own hands. "Sure, Mom," I said. "I'll be there Saturday." It was time for the confrontation I'd been preparing for my entire life. I walked into my childhood home that Saturday with a calm I'd never felt before. My parents were waiting in the same living room where they'd delivered their inheritance bombshell 4 months earlier, but this time the energy was completely different. They looked older, more fragile. My father's confidence was gone, replaced by a nervous energy that made him fidget with his hands. My mother kept smoothing her hair, a telltale sign of anxiety I'd known since childhood. Jake wasn't there. "Where's Jake?" I asked as I settled into the same chair I'd sat in during our last family meeting. He's out looking at a business opportunity," my mom said quickly. "We wanted to talk to you privately first." I nodded and waited. I had learned the power of silence, of making other people fill the uncomfortable spaces with their own words. My father cleared his throat. "Harper, we want you to know how proud we are of you. Your grades in medical school have been outstanding, and we know you're going to be an incredible doctor." "Thank you," I said simply. "We also want you to know that we've been thinking a lot about our conversation in March," my mother added. "About the inheritance, about family responsibilities." "What about it?" They exchanged a look that I now recognized as panic barely held in check. "Well," my father began, "we've realized that we may have been thinking about things the wrong way. Family isn't just about taking care of the person who needs the most help. It's also about recognizing the person who contributes the most." I almost smiled. They were trying to manipulate me with the exact same logic they'd used to justify favoring Jake, just flipped around now that they needed something from me. "What are you saying?" I asked. "We're saying that we want to revise our estate planning," my mother said. "We want to make sure you're taken care of too." "That's very thoughtful," I said. "But I thought you said the decision was final, that Jake needed the stability more than I did." Another uncomfortable exchange of glances. "Well, things change," my father said. "Circumstances change. We've been reevaluating our financial situation, and we think there might be ways to be more Equitable. What kind of circumstances? I asked. The question hung in the air like a challenge. This was the moment where they had to decide whether to tell me the truth or continue lying. They chose lying. Just general financial planning, my mother said vaguely. Making sure we're being smart about our investments, our business decisions. That's interesting, I said, because Mrs. Rodriguez called me a few weeks ago. The color drained from both of their faces. She was concerned about some irregularities in the business accounts, I continued. She thought I should know about the family's financial situation. My father's jaw tightened. Maria Rodriguez had no business discussing private family matters with you. Didn't she? I pulled out the folder I'd prepared. Because according to these documents, your private family matters are about to become very public when you lose the house to foreclosure. I spread the papers across the coffee table between us. Bank statements, loan documents, credit reports, the real inheritance paperwork showing their massive debts. My mother started crying. Harper, sweetheart, we can explain. Please do, I said. Explain how you spent nearly $1 million on Jake while telling me I didn't deserve help because I was too independent. Explain how you gave him my inheritance before I even knew I had one. Explain how you planned to manipulate me into bailing you out of the mess you created. My father's face had gone from pale to red. We never planned to manipulate you. We're your parents. When parents need help, children step up. That's how family works. Is it? I stood up and walked to the mantelpiece, where family photos showed years of Jake's achievements being celebrated while mine were barely acknowledged. Because that's not how family worked when I needed help paying for college. That's not how family worked when I was eating peanut butter sandwiches for dinner so I could afford textbooks. That was different, my mother protested. You were capable of handling those challenges. And you're not capable of handling these? I turned back to face them. You're asking your daughter, who you deemed too independent to deserve an inheritance, to solve problems that you created by giving everything to your son who you deemed too dependent to solve his own problems. The logic trap was perfect, and I could see in their faces that they realized it. How much do you need? My father asked quietly. What? How much money do you need to help us get back on our feet? We know you don't have much now, but when you're a doctor, when you're established, you want me to mortgage my future to pay for Jake's past, I said. We want our family to stay together, my mother said through her tears. I looked at these two people who had raised me, who had shaped my understanding of love, family, and worth. I thought about the little girl who had tried so hard to earn their approval, who had worked herself to exhaustion trying to prove she deserved their investment. Where's Jake right now? I asked. He's looking at a franchise opportunity, my father said. It requires a significant upfront investment, but let me guess, $200,000. Their shocked silence was answer enough. He called me last week, I explained. He wanted to talk about getting an advance on his inheritance to fund this new business venture. He thinks he's inheriting $3 million. My mother's crying intensified. So let me see if I understand the current situation, I continued. You've spent nearly $1 million on Jake over the past 6 years. You're about to lose everything because of those decisions. Jake thinks he's getting a massive inheritance that doesn't exist. And your plan is for me to work for the next decade to pay off debts that I didn't create, to save a house that I'll never inherit, to preserve an inheritance for Jake that you already spent on Jake. You're our daughter, my father said desperately. We love you. Do you? I asked. Because love isn't just a feeling. Love is action. Love is investment. Love is believing someone deserves good things not because of what they can do for you, but because of who they are. I gathered up my papers and put them back in the folder. I'm not going to bail you out, I said. I'm not going to sacrifice my future to pay for your mistakes. And I'm not going to pretend anymore that this family has ever seen me as anything more than a backup plan. Harper, please, my mother begged. If you don't help us, we'll lose everything. I paused at the door and looked back at them one last time. You already lost everything, I said. You lost it the day you decided that fairness meant giving everything to the child who contributed nothing and expecting everything from the child who contributed everything. What about Jake? My father called out. When he finds out about the money, about the inheritance that isn't there anymore, what's going to happen to him? I met his eyes with a calm I'd never felt before. I guess he'll have to figure it out, I said. After all, that's what you taught me to do. As I walked to my car, I could hear my mother's sobs through the front door. For the first time in my life, they didn't make me want to run back and fix everything. Instead, they sounded like the consequences of choices that had nothing to do with me. I didn't have to wait long to see how everything unfolded. The beauty of small towns is that news travels fast, especially when it involves a prominent family like mine falling from grace. The first domino fell 2 weeks after our confrontation. Mrs. Rodriguez called to tell me that my parents had to close the accounting firm. They couldn't make rent, couldn't pay their business insurance, and had lost several major clients when word got out about their financial troubles. Your father came to me begging for a loan, she told me. He offered to make me a partner if I'd invest $50,000 to keep the business afloat. What did you tell him? I told him I couldn't throw good money after bad. Harper, they've been living in denial for so long that they can't see how bad things really are. The second domino fell when Jake found out about the franchise opportunity falling through. He had been so confident that he'd already put down a deposit using credit cards my parents had given him. When they had to tell him they couldn't cover the investment, he finally started asking questions about the family finances. According to my Aunt Sarah, who still spoke to me occasionally, Jake's reaction to learning the truth was explosive. He screamed at them for 2 hours, she told me over coffee. He accused them of lying to him, of setting him up for failure, of ruining his life. Then he packed up his stuff and moved in with some friends. How are my parents handling it? Not well. Your mother hasn't left the house in a week. Your father keeps calling everyone in the family asking for loans. I felt a flicker of something that might have been sympathy, but it was quickly overshadowed by a stronger emotion, relief. Relief that I wasn't responsible for fixing this. Relief that I had built a life separate from their chaos. The third domino was the foreclosure notice. My parents had 60 days to bring their mortgage current or lose the house. The house I had grown up in, the house that was supposed to be Jake's inheritance, the house that represented everything they had built together. My father called me 3 times that day. I didn't answer. He left voicemails that started angry and ended desperate. Harper, I know you're upset with us, but this is bigger than our disagreement. This is about family legacy. This is about your childhood home. Harper, please call me back. We need to talk about solutions. We need to work together as a family. Harper, your mother is falling apart. She keeps saying this is all her fault. Please, just call us back. I listened to each message once and then deleted them. The fourth domino was Jake's complete financial collapse. Without my parents' support, he couldn't afford his apartment, his car payments, or his credit card bills. The friends he'd moved in with got tired of supporting him within a month. He had to sell his sports car and move back in with my parents just as they were preparing to lose their house. My Aunt Sarah painted a picture of 3 people crammed into a house they were about to lose, each blaming the others, none of them willing to take responsibility for the choices that had led them there. Jake keeps saying your parents should have taught him how to manage money, she told me. Your parents keep saying Jake should have been more responsible. Nobody wants to admit that they all made this mess together. But the most satisfying domino was watching Jake realize what I had known my entire life, that he had no idea how to take care of himself. He applied for jobs he was completely unqualified for. He pitched business ideas to anyone who would listen, not understanding that his track record of failure made him completely uninvestable. He asked relatives for loans that no one was willing to give. For the first time in his 30 years, Jake was experiencing what I had lived with forever, the understanding that the world didn't owe him anything, and that success required work, skill, and persistence. The final domino fell on a Tuesday in October. Mrs. Rodriguez called to tell me that my parents had filed for bankruptcy and were moving into a one-bedroom apartment across town. Jake had finally found a job at a local warehouse, working night shifts for just above minimum wage. "Your father asked me to call you," she said. "He wanted you to know that they're proud of how well you're doing in medical school. He said to tell you that you were right about everything and that he's sorry." I thanked her for the message and hung up. That evening, I sat in my apartment looking at my medical school textbooks, at my neat little life that I had built with my own hands, at my future that belonged entirely to me. I thought about the Harper who had walked into that living room in March, desperate for her parents' approval and devastated by their rejection. That Harper had believed that family love was something you earned through achievement and sacrifice. This Harper understood that real love didn't require earning, and that the people who truly cared about you didn't make you prove your worth over and over again. My phone buzzed with a text from my study group asking if I wanted to join them for dinner. These people who had become my chosen family, who celebrated my successes and supported my struggles, who saw my value not in what I could provide them but in who I was. I texted back that I'd be there in 20 minutes, grabbed my jacket, and walked out into my new life. Behind me, my phone rang with another call from my parents. I didn't even look back. 6 months later, I was in my final year of medical school, preparing for residency applications, when I got an unexpected visitor. I was studying in the campus library when someone tapped me on the shoulder. I looked up to see Jake, looking thinner and more tired than I'd ever seen him, wearing a uniform from the warehouse where he worked. "Hey, Harper," he said quietly. "Can we talk?" I gestured to the empty chair across from me, curious about what he could possibly want to say. He sat down heavily and stared at his hands for a long moment before speaking. "I owe you an apology," he said. "Actually, I owe you about 1,000 apologies, but I'll start with one big one." I waited. "I've been working at the warehouse for 4 months now," he continued. 40 hours a week, overnight shift, doing physical labor that leaves me exhausted every day. And you know what I realized? This is the first real job I've ever had. I'm 30 years old, and this is the first time in my life that I've had to show up somewhere every day and work for money that I earned myself. He looked up at me with eyes that looked older than they had 6 months ago. "I also realized that you've been doing this since you were 16. Working, studying, supporting yourself, making your own way. While I was playing video games and spending mom and dad's money, you were building a life." "Jake, let me finish," he said. "I need to say this. I need you to know that I understand now what I took from you. It wasn't just money, though that was bad enough. I took your parents' attention, their investment, their belief in your potential. I took resources that should have been shared equally. I took your inheritance before you even knew you had one." His voice cracked slightly, "But mostly I took your childhood. While you were working multiple jobs and raising yourself, I was being coddled and enabled. While you were learning independence and strength, I was learning helplessness and entitlement. And when everything fell apart, you survived because you had skills and resilience. I nearly didn't survive because I had nothing. I felt something unexpected, Compassion for this man who had been my parents' golden child, but was ultimately as much a victim of their dysfunction as I was. "How are you doing now?" I asked. "Better," he said. "It's hard, but I'm learning. I got a promotion to day shift supervisor. I'm taking night classes at the community college, trying to figure out what I actually want to do with my life instead of what get-rich-quick scheme looks easiest." He paused. "I'm also in therapy, trying to understand how I got to be 30 years old without any life skills and how to build them now." "That's good," I said. "I'm glad you're getting help. Harper, I know I have no right to ask you for anything, but I wanted you to know that Mom and Dad are struggling, really struggling. Not just financially, but emotionally. They know they destroyed our family with their choices." I felt the familiar tug of guilt, the lifelong conditioning to be responsible for everyone else's feelings. "Jake, I'm not asking you to help them," he said quickly. "I'm not asking you to fix anything or save anyone. I know that's not your job. It never was your job, even though we all acted like it was." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. "I wrote you a letter," he said. "It's everything I wanted to say, but was too ashamed to say in person. You don't have to read it now or ever, but I wanted you to have it." He stood up. "I also wanted you to know that I'm proud of you. I know that's weird coming from me, and I know I have no right to feel proud since I had nothing to do with your success. But watching you build this life, seeing how strong and independent and successful you are, it makes me proud to be your brother, even though I know I haven't earned that relationship." He turned to go, then paused. "One more thing. I want you to know that I tell everyone about my sister, the doctor. I brag about your grades, your achievements, your strength. I know I spent most of our lives resenting your success, but now I understand that you're the best thing our family ever produced." After he left, I sat in the library holding his letter, feeling emotions I couldn't quite name. That night, I called my Aunt Sarah and asked about my parents. "They're surviving," she told me. "Your father got a job doing bookkeeping for a small business. Your mother is working part-time at a retail store. They're living in a tiny apartment and driving a 15-year-old car, but they're making it work. Are they still angry at me for not helping?" There was a pause. "Honey, I think they've moved past anger into understanding. They see what Jake went through, learning to support himself for the first time. They see how their choices affected both of their children. I think they finally understand that asking you to sacrifice your future for their mistakes wasn't fair." "Do they ever ask about me?" "Every time I see them. They want to know how school is going, if you're happy, if you're healthy. They miss you, Harper. But they also respect your boundaries. They know they have to earn back your trust, if that's even possible." 2 weeks later, I opened Jake's letter. It was 5 pages of handwritten honesty about his childhood, his mistakes, his understanding of the damage that had been done, and his commitment to becoming a person worthy of being my brother. At the end, he wrote, "I don't expect forgiveness, and I don't expect a relationship. But I want you to know that if you ever decide you want a brother who finally understands what family really means, I'm here. I'm learning to be someone you could be proud of." I folded the letter and put it in my desk drawer. 3 months later, I graduated medical school at the top of my class. I matched into a competitive residency program at a prestigious hospital. I had achieved everything I had worked for entirely on my own terms. At my graduation ceremony, I looked out into the audience at my chosen family, my study group, my mentors, my friends who had supported me through the hardest years of my life. In the back row, I spotted a familiar figure. Jake, wearing a suit I'd never seen before, crying openly as I walked across the stage. After the ceremony, he approached me carefully. "I hope it's okay that I came," he said. I needed to see this. I needed to witness you achieving something incredible. How did you even know about it? Mrs. Rodriguez told me. She's been keeping track of your achievements. She's proud of you too. We stood there awkwardly for a moment. Harper, he said, I know we have a long way to go, if we ever have anywhere to go at all. But I want you to know that watching you succeed, knowing that you built this life despite everything our family put you through, it's taught me what real strength looks like. I looked at my brother, really looked at him, and saw someone I'd never seen before. Someone who was working, learning, growing, taking responsibility for his choices. Would you like to get coffee sometime? I asked. His face lit up with hope. I would love that, he said. As I drove home that night, I realized that justice hadn't been about revenge or punishment. Justice had been about natural consequences, about people finally experiencing the results of their choices, and about me learning that I had the power to choose my own family. I was a doctor now. I had built a life of purpose, success, and authentic relationships. I had learned to value myself not for what I could provide others, but for who I was. And for the first time in my life, I understood that I was enough, just as I was. Looking back now, I realized that the greatest gift my family ever gave me wasn't money or support or even love in the traditional sense. The greatest gift they gave me was adversity that forced me to become strong, independent, and self-reliant. My parents thought they were punishing me by withholding their investment and support. Instead, they were teaching me that I didn't need their validation to succeed. They thought they were helping Jake by enabling his dependence. Instead, they were crippling his ability to build a meaningful life. The inheritance they stole from me was nothing compared to the self-worth I built without them. The family that abandoned me led me to create a chosen family that truly values me. Today, I'm a successful doctor with a career I love, relationships built on mutual respect, and a sense of self-worth that nobody can take away from me. Jake is slowly rebuilding his life, learning skills he should have developed decades ago, but finally becoming someone he can be proud of. My parents lost their business, their house, and their comfortable retirement. But more importantly, they lost the relationship with both of their children due to choices they made about fairness, love, and family responsibility. The most surprising part of this whole story is that I'm not angry anymore. I'm grateful. Grateful that I learned early that I could only depend on myself. Grateful that I developed resilience and strength. Grateful that I built a life based on my own values rather than trying to earn love from people who didn't know how to give it freely. So I want to ask you, which part of my story surprised you the most? Was it my parents' financial collapse? Jake's transformation? My decision to walk away from my family? Or maybe my choice to eventually give Jake a second chance? And if you were in my situation, what would you have done? Would you have bailed out your family despite their years of favoritism? Would you have cut them off completely? Or would you have found a middle ground? Let me know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more stories about family dynamics, personal growth, and finding your own path in life. Remember, you are not responsible for fixing other people's mistakes, even when those people are family. Your worth is not determined by what you can provide others. And sometimes the most loving thing you can do is allow people to experience the consequences of their choices. Thanks for listening to my story. Until next time, remember that you are enough, just as you are.